What's happening, Crypto Land? Looks like we're having a busy week. I'm Phil. This is the Fun with Crypto podcast, and we are Season 2, Episode 13. All right, I hope everybody's having a good week. I know I am. So we're still on our MIT Bitcoin series, and in this episode, I am going to present the recording that I captured of Lightning implementations, a scaling story, and the speakers that you are going to hear are Fabrice Drouin, Christian Decker, and Tadge Dryja. And I hope I pronounced all those names correctly. I apologize if I don't. So without further ado, here is Lightning implementations, a scaling story.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
So we'll talk about the history, right?
Right, or whatever you guys want.
Yeah. So this is sort of an open panel. If people have questions, want to yell things, you can do that. I guess the history of payment channels is probably, Satoshi wrote about it.
Oh, I mean,
yeah.
I mean the interesting part is I just gave a lecture on this on Thursday, and that's a strong. I'm a weak little engineer, so that doesn't count. What I usually do is I ask people what the first off-chain payment channel system is, and usually they will go for the Spielman style payment channels, right? The unidirectional ones. I sign and give it to you, and then you have the choice. But if you really squint at it sideways, the end sequence mechanism is already a payment channel mechanism where we could have a state represented by a transaction, and we could just change it over and over again.
It didn't work, right?
It didn't, but
but it was, the idea was there. It's like
the
it's
idea was
called
there.
end sequence, and it goes up and it replaces. But in the early versions of Bitcoin, there was the idea there of like, let's have a pay. He called them like high frequency channels or something, and it didn't actually work. But the idea was certainly there.
Yeah.
And I know that like Mike Hearn was working on implementations for Bitcoin J, so like the idea of payment channels was sort of in Bitcoin from the beginning. And then I guess the Lightning side, there was the decrementing, or yours thing, decrementing time locks. What was that called?
Duplex micropayments channels.
Yeah, duplex.
I wanted to grab the name and sort of grab the idea and name squat you guys, but that didn't help.
Yeah. So then, but that one was, the time where it expires keeps getting closer, and you can reverse direction that way. And then I guess with Lightning, it was you sort of reveal key. You needed check sequence verify, which then sort of reintroduced the sequence field. But this time it worked in a consensus compatible way. And then part of it then was also like, I guess it got it's sort of weird because it got wrapped up in SegWit and Bitcoin splitting and all these weird things. And so I know a lot of people on RPTC hate Lightning and hate me, and it's oh, okay. And so it has been a weirdly polarizing thing. And also now there's all these people on Twitter with Lightning little emojis in their names. I'm I don't know. So it's not just a protocol, I guess. There's all sorts of other things going on with it.
Yeah, I mean, people really seem to like it and really seem to identify with Lightning. I probably should use this. Yeah, it's fascinating how much of a grassroots movement this has become. From an academic paper in 2015 that was born out of an idea that we probably had all along. Which is always the case with Bitcoin, by the way. If you think you have a great idea, then there will be a Bitcoin talk post somewhere that yeah.
Right. Someone's already thought.
And all of a sudden, this whole thing is just taking off and exploding, and sometimes it's scary to look at the amount of money that is currently in the Lightning Network, to be honest. It's just been a wild ride so far.
Although 2015, nobody really, it wasn't, so the first, when Joseph and I published the paper, I was working at a different company. It wasn't something I worked on most of the time. Joseph just sort of hung out. like nobody really cared, and then like slowly it got to be more popular, and it was like, oh, you should work on this. So it wasn't, and I think for stuff you were working, like other people too, there wasn't as much interest in 2014.
The fun part is that Sea Lightning at least got started by Rusty when he joined Blockstream, and he was like, hey, I'm quitting my 20 years Linux job, and I'm now going to work on Bitcoin Core, and I'm freshening up on my C++, and oh, by the way, I wrote this small blog post about how Lightning is working. So when he interviewed, he was told, yeah, glad you can join. Do you want to work on Lightning? Here's your own project. And he was like, but I wanted to go Bitcoin Core. But he seems to be okay with it now, and I think he actually enjoys working on C Lightning a lot more than he would have done with Bitcoin Core right now.
And I think this is also something that is special about Lightning as opposed to other crypto projects. It's not driven by a single company or an entity. It's an open source project. The specs are open source. Anyone can contribute. And then you have then you have different implementations, and you can build your own from the specs. But it is a really special structure that you don't find in many other projects. And I think that's one of the reasons why it has picked up the way it has.
Well, to be fair, the build specs are probably not the easiest ones to read, and I'm probably also at fault for that. Yeah, I do agree that this having a spec come first and then everybody else implements it is really important. It also, having multiple companies work on this, gives us this sort of trial by fire, right? We all come from different directions. We all have different requirements. I mean, you concentrate mostly on mobile phones and a device that are very restricted in both resources and bandwidth, whereas we work on sort of a server-side implementation, and L&D is working on a desktop implementation. So your requirements are quite different from what ours are, and still we managed by through this proposal and discussion process, we end up with a solution that might not resemble the initial proposal anymore, but which has had this discussion and is now better for it.
We talk like the sort of future. So right now there's a bunch of different companies, a bunch of people using it. I don't know if exchange it so initial thoughts were like, okay, exchanges should do this. You shouldn't have to deposit to an exchange. I guess Arwin, but like some people. Ethan in Boston is making it sort of, it's not, I don't know if he I think he says it's not really a Lightning channel because it works on coins without SegWit. And so it's similar but not the same thing. But it does let you have a channel with an exchange. So instead of deposit, it's move to one side of a channel if I want to buy or sell. But it's still pretty nascent. Like most exchanges aren't doing this. And so there's still a lot of custody. And I feel like hopefully we'll start to get less custody, more channels. But like, what about sort of the future? Like, what do you guys think are use cases you're seeing, or that are starting or not there yet?
That's a good one.
I'm not sure it's our job to think of the use cases.
No, probably it isn't. Probably we can't even come up with this. And I mean, when the internet was invented, like 25 to 30 years ago, or when it became popular, the big guns nowadays did not exist, and we couldn't even see what would be a useful thing. But there are use cases that I find personally interesting and that I find are worthwhile to pursue, and for me that is one of the things that is utterly broken in the current internet is how content creators get paid for their contributions, right? Currently, we have this huge stack of advertisers, and basically every company becomes this one-trick pony, as somebody from Andreessen Horowitz mentioned recently. Is every single company out there that is doing something with the web currently has acquired some users, then become popular, and then show them ads, or create profiles for the users and then show them targeted ads, because, well, you can charge more for that. And why are people actually using it? That's the only way to actually make money on the internet right now. And that's a really poor state of affairs. And I would really like to have a system where we can fairly compensate people that created content that we consume without them having to go through all of these intermediaries, and these intermediaries just collecting a bunch of profiles for us to target us better. I mean, that's sort of backwards, isn't it? And what ends up at the content creator then is only a small fraction of what the value charged to advertisees is. I think that's definitely a direction that I would like to go for, but I definitely don't claim that it's the killer app that we're looking for, or that it will even happen. It might be something that we can't think of ourselves.
Yeah. So there's a question. Oh, Fabrice, sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Keep going. There was a question from the audience.
Cool.
Yep. The network topology has been kind of a point of controversy. Does the current state of the network concern you at all, or when you look at it, does it meet your expectations, or is it deviate from your expectations of what the topology would end up like at this point of maturity? And do you think it's going to evolve in a different direction?
So one thing that I recently read, and I can't really remember where it was, but they were basically saying that the current network really looks like a scale-free network. And one property for scale-free networks is that they are pretty resilient to random failures, and so that's encouraging. On the other side, there are nodes with quite a lot of capacity and a high in degree and of edges. And if there are targeted failures, we might end up with the network actually being shut down.
It's tricky because that also is more efficient, right? So like,
right.
If you want efficiency, you have like a node with like really high degree, and then your routes are going to be really short. But then it becomes more fragile, and so it's like, I think one of the other issues is there's not really attacks. Like we're not seeing. People aren't like trying to like actively hack and break this maybe the way.
I probably should write up the ones that I came up with. Not sure I actually want to do that.
But right, most of the people who are finding problems are the ones working on building this, right? It's not like you have like weird things being exploited and you have no idea what's going on. So if that's the case, and then I think that's sort of the case in a lot of things in Bitcoin as well, then yeah, you're going to gravitate towards a more efficient system that might be a little more brittle.
And there's also something that the network that you see with explorers is the public network, but it's very different from what you actually have on Lightning. For example, terminal nodes, the one that either just send payments or receive payments, are not visible on the network. Mobile nodes are not visible on the network. None of the channels that are created for mobile wallets are visible on the explorers. So what you see is actually the core network that actually does routes payments, but there's a whole bunch of channels and nodes that you don't see. And as it is today, with the number of nodes and channels you have publicly, you could serve a lot of users, millions of users, without having more channels. You don't need to have one public node for every user or one public channel for every user.
So Lightning Explorers also have a really bad track record about keeping their data up to date. So I'm pretty sure that some of them show really old, non-existent nodes that shouldn't be there anymore. And I think that there is a point in us attacking our own network, to be honest. We could try to run some of the attacks that are being talked about and academia is starting to find, and just discourage people from actually running these huge degree nodes that then become a single point of failure in the network. And I think we should probably educate people about the issues that a centralized network might have. We shouldn't exaggerate what these issues are. We should be realistic in what they are in both directions. Don't play them down and don't exaggerate them. And we should test how efficient they are in destroying the network. And by doing so, we can build a better network.
Hi. So, could you perhaps have a short discussion on comparing HTLCs and the interledger protocol, particularly with respect of the capital lookup and how, for example, if you have a trade that depends on an HTLC, you have an American call options problem?
I'm not that familiar with interledger.
So I think there's a Stanford thing where HTLC is considered harmful was the name of the talk. And I was like, I'm just finding words. So I'm as actually Joseph named them HTLCs, but as like introducing them, obviously I think HTLCs are a great idea. They certainly have their limitations, but in a system where you just sort of optimistically, I'll send a Satoshi, forward it on, and then the receiving node says, yeah, I got it. I'm like, okay, I'll send another Satoshi, or maybe I double it each time or something. Yeah. That can work in many cases. I think it's a big part of what HTLCs let you do is blame people. Is that if someone stalls or if someone fails to release something or doesn't get through, you can have incentives where so this isn't like Rusty keeps talking about it, but it's not actually implemented where you say, okay, I demand a proof that some channel downstream from me has closed, right? And then I can very quickly see okay, this is the person whose fault it was, so I don't have to close. So that kind of thing is much harder when you don't have an HTLC, and then you can get, for multiple hops, it's not clear who did the wrong thing. So I think a lot of, so I don't know exactly the details of how Interledger deals with blaming people, but once you get to longer channels where you're not even sure who's in the middle, HTLCs, a big part of it becomes about blaming people.
Well, and of course, HTLCs are constant in time, whereas streaming payments aren't.
Yeah, and you can make it sort of all or nothing. So and then I guess the optionality of swaps. I guess in the bold spec anyway, there's nothing about multiple currencies. So that's sort of a separate angle that people are looking at. I think yeah, it is a downside in that if I want to trade, Bitcoins for Litecoins, I guess that's to stick with. Yeah, that whoever's releasing that R value, they have a lot of freedom in when they do so. But that can be priced in, I guess. I don't think the solution is okay. Let's try to crank the knob to make it really tight timing on these different chains. I think the solution is okay. Well, you're not buying direct swaps. You're buying this option, and the person who's at the end who releases their R value, well, they pay some more because they've got this time. There we go. Have you looked at?
We focus on Bitcoin mostly. Experiments on Litecoin because we didn't have a choice.
Wait, you focus on Bitcoin? What's that?
So no, we don't plan to implement swaps. Not in the future anyway.
So we've also rejected quite a few pull requests for alternative currencies because, well, it's just a burden to support them. And we support Bitcoin, Rectest, Testnet, and Mainnet, and Litecoin because Litecoin was our test balloon for the SegWit activation, and that's all the currencies we currently have. I mean, you're obviously free to build your own swap-based exchange, but you have to be aware that there are certain risks involved. Yes.
Hi. My first Bitcoin wallet ran on my cell phone, and I had to wait to catch up with all the data. A long time ago. That would have been 2011. And Bitcoin has come a very, very long way. There are lots of alt currencies, etc. And some have come and some have gone. And there is a large wake of dead blockchain data. And some of us have built systems that rely on information in contracts and other things on that data. Who, aside from me, who actually is thinking about how we engage with the data in a blockchain that no longer has mining on it?
I don't think nobody's proposing to remove mining from.
I mean, are you talking about Bitcoin or like other coins that have died off, or because in Bitcoin there's lots of mining.
I understand that there's lots of mining in Bitcoin right now. Okay, but there are other blockchain technologies. And so as you extend out, say I want to interface between Bitcoin and other things, I want to sit there and talk to contracts, I want to go and interface with something from the Bitcoin blockchain and rely on data outside of the blockchain itself. What is the mechanism for preservation of the external data that people in those contracts will rely on in the event that those external data storage chains are no longer active?
So yes, so one of the often cited advantages of Lightning is that we no longer store individual payments or individual data points in the blockchain itself. And the reason why that's cited as a positive is because, well, it makes profiling hard. But you're right. If we build systems on top of that information that is no longer stored in a blockchain, then we might have a bit of a hard time. Then again, I mean, this information belongs to the people that actually participated in the payment in this case, and they can still provide this extra information anchored into the source of truth, which in our case is the Bitcoin blockchain, and they have now the power to selectively show this information to participants that might require it. So it's no longer just this broadcast medium where we insert data into a blockchain and just everybody can read from it, but it's now data that belongs to somebody, namely the participants of a payment, that are empowered to either show you this information or keep it secret from you if they don't want to share it.
Yes, I'm not 100% clear, but in many cases, so like I have a paper, discrete log contracts, which uses Lightning channels, and you can put external data into it in a way that no one can tell that you're doing so. So in many cases, the solution would be, okay, it is the responsibility of the contract participants to manage the data that's going into these contracts. But you can make it small enough that your wallet is storing this stuff, and you're not querying out to some database all the time. That's one potential solution.
So,
Just shout. It works.
all right. So I wanted to just getting back on the HTLC's question, I do want to clarify one thing, which was it's my fault for sort of allowing this in the talk. But Interledger does use HTLCs for exactly what you're referring to, for attribution between counterparties. What it doesn't have is ledger enforcement of those HTLCs. So you can, when you have a long multi-hop payment, attribute any faults. The immediate counterparty to that particular node can attribute that fault and therefore can close the channel if they steal that payment. And I'm happy to discuss that part offline. I recognize that the American call option issue only applies for multi-asset network, but there's another problem with HTLCs, which is the griefing attack that's possible on the network, where if you receive a long multi-hop payment, you can just decline to fulfill that HTLC and therefore lock up a multiple of your capital on the network. So how would you address that? What are you concerned about what that could do to the network? Like the network, you use HTLCs.
So like the receiver doesn't release R.
Yeah.
Yeah. Close the channel. I mean, a lot of these things are like you close the channel and then things time out.
So there's questions where we don't have a definitive answer, and this is definitely one of them. And as a former researcher or current researcher, this is really the interesting stuff that makes this interesting, right? This is a problem where we can put some energy into it and come up with new solutions, and hopefully we can eventually solve this. But we don't have a definitive answer right now.
But if you're connected, if you have a channel with a node that is not playing nice because it is slower because it's not responding, you're locking up money that is basically useless. So you will eventually close that channel. So it's not a definitive answer, but you will clean your channels eventually and maybe not connect to that node again. But if a channel is not responsive, it's not usable, and you lock money in it, you won't keep it all.
With HTLCs, it's not just the immediate counterparty who's read, it's the entire chain of upstream routers,
but
right?
there is a node that has a direct channel that is not working. So eventually, it doesn't make sense for them to keep it open.
So if you're a bad actor in this network, then it's quite likely that eventually everybody will just hate you and not connect to you anymore. And this attack not exactly being free also means that you are putting aside some collateral with it. Now, the griefing attack allows you to have multiple of that amount being locked up, but it's still not free, and you basically become really unpopular on the network.
So I have a couple questions. One, I know a lot of people talk about like the fact that Lightning allows people to make transactions that they wouldn't otherwise be able to make on-chain, such as like dust transactions or even sub-Satoshi transactions. And there's some arguments that that could be trusted in some ways. So I'm wondering how you guys think about that and how you get around that trustedness. And then on a slightly related but different topic for those of us who are slightly less technical in the room, how do you see, people getting onboarded more and more as we go forward? Because like at least what's visible, there's over 600 BTC on Lightning right now, but there's still like a long way to go, right? So those are two things I've been wondering about. If you can just touch on that quickly.
So with the trustedness, you mean that some of the payments are so small that you can't really enforce them on the Bitcoin blockchain? Okay.
Whole sub-Satoshi thing.
Well, the whole sub-dust thing.
Yeah. So, there's two, right? There's sub-Satoshi, which is like could never possibly do anything, and then there's
So the way I remember millisatoshis being introduced was
Joseph.
Was that
Credits?
Okay.
No, I was always against it. So I'm still like in the Australia thing. Like we need to get rid of sub-Satoshi. And
okay. Apparently it was Joseph, but the basic idea was that he said that okay, we can send 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin, and Bitcoin currently is over $1,000. So 1/1,000,000th of a cent is still bigger than a Satoshi. So we can't talk about micropayments when it comes to Bitcoin anymore. And then somebody spun off and said, oh, we should actually do our internal accounting in thousands of a Satoshi. And that's where the whole millisatoshi thing came from. But yes, you're right, we can't really enforce them on-chain. But as I mentioned, it's basically an account bookkeeping trick, right? If we accumulate enough of these tiny payments, then eventually we will go above a threshold that can actually be enforced. And probably it's only then when you actually care about this, because well, if the value is so small that you can't represent it in your system, and you're rounding down amounts of satoshis anyway, then it's highly likely that you don't really care about these tiny amounts until you have millions of them, and then you actually can enforce them again. So it's more of internal bookkeeping rather than anything else.
And then I was hoping, Fabrice, you might touch on the onboarding, since you've been working in the mobile wallet space.
Yeah, our idea is we want Lightning to grow, and for this, it needs to be reliable, and you need to have good tools for everyone. And we believe that basically, if you want to build a Lightning wallet, you have three options today. It's custodian, it's a remote control, that is, you have a Lightning node somewhere, and you have a small application that controls it, and you can try to have a full Lightning node that runs on your mobile. That's what we're trying to do. And we have to deal with the limitations of what you can do on the mobile. And the biggest limitation is it's offline most of the time, so you have to catch up when you start. And if you want something that is usable within a few seconds, then you need to catch up on the Bitcoin blockchain. We do this through the Electron protocol. And you have to catch up on Lightning. You have your local view of the routing network has to be good enough so you can route payments as soon as you're started. And we're pushing hard for small changes in specs to accommodate these use case, using basically being able to synchronize your network view as quickly as possible. But we believe that providing users with all the options of a full Lightning node is one of the best ways to onboard users. And having a network that is as reliable as possible is a good way of making people invent use cases. And that's what I meant when I said we don't, I'm not saying we don't care about use cases, but things like Satoshi's Place or that the chicken camera feed it's fun, and it's not something we came up with. And I think if we build good pipes for payments and good tools to use the pipes, people will build things with it.
Yeah, I think we should also mention that you mentioned these 3 graduations of nodes. Basically, you have a custodial wallet, or have a remote control wallet, or have a full node on your phone. Basically, those are not really discrete steps, right? There's graduations of this, and it's interesting for me, for example, to see that some of these graduations are worse than the custodial wallet, for example. There is, for example, a fork of Eclair, which shall not be named, which has outsourced the route finding and the maintenance of the local topology view to a centralized server. And that's really the worst of both worlds, because, well, you're basically telling the service, hey, I'd like to send $5 for my coffee there, please give me a path, but you're still able to lose your phone and hence lose your money, right? So you've given away all of your privacy, but still have the capacity of actually losing your money. And so I think that's important to see that it's a hard challenge, but it's worth tackling it.
Yes, because if you can't provide the option, at least if you have the option, you can choose not to use it, and maybe you lose some privacy and something that is faster to use. But at least we like to push things as far as they would go with
the main reason for a lot of these things is the resource cost of the actual run. So the more you can optimize, the more you can reduce this. Then you give people options. Just because it's easier to run, Electrum than blockchain.info, or I mean the opposite, I guess. You try to make them as easy as possible, but you still are going to have people using, hosted.
Right, and I think that's perfectly fair, right? I mean, we can't force people to use the most secure version and to spend the time to become informed about what is out there. And that this doesn't just apply to Lightning, by the way. This is for Bitcoin and all of the security-related information. The only thing we as developers can do is give options that sort of have good trade-offs, and if people are willing to go that extra mile and invest time to learn about the trade-offs and then make an informed decision, that's fine, but we can't force them, and we shouldn't shame people for not going that extra mile, because there's far more important stuff that they need to do in their day-to-day lives. And so we need to work hard on making these secure options easy to use and accessible, but we really don't have any power over their decisions, and that's perfectly fine.
So I think we're running short on time. We have time for like 2 more questions. I know that you 2 have had your hands raised for a while, so we'll just do those
Great.
2 and then break for lunch.
There's a ton of fascination in like the broader crypto space with the identity solution, right? I think it was maybe a month or 2 months ago on the Lightning Dev mailing list where there was talk about proof of payment as a stand-in for that, with just using hash pre-images as showing you don't need to know who I am, but you can see that I have paid for this piece of digital content in the past. I was wondering if you guys could kind of expand on that and talk about kind of how, specifically I'm really interested in the mechanism of how that would work, securely storing hash pre-images, maybe in a Fabrice in a mobile environment. So just kind of proof of payment overall, and then kind of the mechanism of how it would work.
So Rusty is a bit critical about using pre-images just for only pre-images for authentication. sakes, especially because these pre-images are shared with the wider network, or at least with the participants of the route that you've taken, right? So there is no really unique way of saying, hey, I'm the guy who paid it. There's just a way of saying, hey, somebody paid this, and we should be fine with this. And that matches the usual use case that I go to when I say, hey, we have an agreement that if I pay X, I will get delivery of service Y. And then I can show the pre-image and say, hey, this contract, by the way, was fulfilled, and I should be getting whatever was promised to me. Without auxiliary information, it's probably not a good idea to just use pre-images for authentication. But yeah, there's more advanced things we can do that would give you way more security when it comes to identifying the one who paid and making it a personalized proof of payment that does not give a wider network the access to whatever you're trying to protect.
There's a bunch of trade-offs in Lightning, more so than Bitcoin, where there's like identity. Whereas in Bitcoin, you're like, I have my node. I want to minimize its identity pretty much everywhere I can. Nodes don't have publicly identifiable keys. You want addresses to people you can use, all these things. Whereas in Lightning, it's like, no, these nodes do have an identity, and you do sort of build up a type of reputation that we were saying. But it's tricky. Like you don't want an identity, but you need some of these things. So it's a trickier problem.
So my question is mostly from the perspective of someone who's actually working on Interledger, and we use Lightning for like micropayments between counterparties. And one thing that I've noticed today that I'm really curious about how you guys think about this in the future is like multi-hop payments are a first-class citizen in Lightning. How is the time latency going to be from a UX perspective? Because today, at least, and I have no idea like how far this projects in the future, a one-hop payment is a wonderful, beautiful experience in Lightning. Even a two-hop payment is a terrible experience in Lightning. Latencies go up to like 1-2 seconds, and I'm trying to send 100 of them. Like, it's just not going to happen fast enough for my use case. And so, like, what are the odds of 5-hop payments being fast in Lightning in 5 years, or should I think of that as like an unlikely thing to happen?
So without anything that is guiding the network construction towards having local channels first, you will probably see very high latency for the foreseeable future, at least, because speed of light doesn't change all that often.
That's what I assume
and having round trips from here to Australia and back and forth like 4 times, it's still going to be quite a long time. But there are some ideas being floated about this network being built from actual use of it, and since we're in the same room, it's quite a lot more likely that we have a transfer between us rather than me sending to somebody in Australia. So the density of the network might correspond to a local distance as well.
For a scale-free graph, 5 hops seems like really long. Like you might someday, but it just seems like you'll have a Pareto distribution of most payments are 1 or 2 hops, and then it gets, as you get it further in hops, they become very infrequent. And so it's annoying that it takes a long time, but you rarely have to deal with it.
So the diameter of the current network of the current strongly connected component is 5, by the way. So that's probably the absolute worst case you could encounter in today's network. Although I've seen people route through 9, but probably for fun.
All right, thank you. Awesome. I think we could probably keep asking you guys questions all day long.
We will be around, so
yeah,
if you catch us, at least I'm happy to talk Lightning all day long.
Yeah.
So I hope you all enjoyed the Lightning scaling story with those speakers. I know I did. If you want to reach me, you could find me on Twitter at CoinIcarus, or on Telegram, same name, at CoinIcarus. Or if you want to shoot me an email, funwithcrypto@protonmail.com. Catch you all next time.